Subscribe. Next. So my objectives, as I said, are networking and education. Let's see what wants to be learned about this space, but also get good people into the room, and at least the people I know, obviously, are good. And so please take the opportunity to meet some of the folks here and see what's possible next. So the presentation that I threw in here, and I'm going to try to keep it brief so we have enough time for networking and also kind of like a crowdsourced Q&A. But I want to do a basic introduction of distributed ledger technology, the IOTA Foundation, Internet of Things, economy of things, and perhaps the kind of social implications and a vision of what's possible ahead. And also, to the degree that it's relevant, I want to provide updates about the state of the IOTA technology in general, and if there's misconceptions in the room. Already someone was talking about its centralized node aspects that I got to speak to or grunt about. We can do that. Truly my I guess most logistical intention is to see anybody that's here or in the Boulder, Denver area that wants to kind of form regular gatherings and get involved with projects specifically working with IOTA and put Boulder, Denver on the map for contributing to something that's a lot bigger than all of us. Just a quick thing on me. You can just zoom through this. My name is Robert MacNaughton. I am a member of the IOTA Evangelist Network, which is kind of a sponsored subcircle of the IOTA Foundation that has the objective to set up connections regionally. And so it's my job to do things like this and to educate people about IOTA and also see if there's industry partners that want to get involved and give resources for that. Now, I consider myself kind of an amateur researcher. I've been in the blockchain crypto space since 2013, contributing where I can, but I do want to say take everything I say with a grain of salt. I am not like a core member of the IOTA Foundation, and so like if I say something stupid and put my foot in the mouth, don't like go write a whole bunch of FUD online about what that hippie in Boulder said about IOTA. But I guess I do consider myself a community builder. I founded the Integral Center here in Boulder and consider myself an innovation broker. And I think this is a big space for innovation, and this is my job of brokering it and bringing you all into the room together. And some people say that I'm good at translating complex topics, so let's see if I do that. Okay, so instead of like starting with cryptocurrencies and distributed ledger tech, I'm going to jump right into I think the topic that helps describe this the best, which is the Internet of Things. Who here is familiar with Internet of Things? Who here would consider yourself an expert in Internet of Things? Okay, good. And I want you all to look around the room and pay attention, because if you have follow-up questions on specific vertical topics, I want you to know where to go. Who is novice, considers yourself novice about Internet of Things? Great. Welcome.
Who is the expert?
There's two folks right here, and there might be another one in this general area. So make sure you squash their shyness with attention. So Internet of Things, I think, could be summed up as just the connection of things through networking, putting things on the internet. Cisco said that it estimates that 50 billion devices will be connected by 2020. We can probably expect that number to scale up pretty rapidly. And you can break it down between the industrial applications, where anybody here heard of Industry 4.0 before? Yeah, so like Industry 4.0 is where we like bring cybernetics into the supply chain and into factories where automation can occur. So we can really start taking humans out of the equation as much as possible. So you can just, if a part breaks, you can 3D print that right away and get it in there and get it going again. So the next industrial revolution has to do with Internet of Things. And then, of course, with consumers, we're already experiencing with the various ways that our smartphones and wearables connect with our microwave, and how that tells us, when to check our email, and those various things. So this is the exciting promise of Internet of Things so far. Any one of y'all want to say something that I've missed?
Smart agriculture is one of the big ones, right?
right? So we need to increase our food output by about 70% by 2050, and we have water security issues. So the IoT is going to be very helpful in increasing crop yields and increasing the efficiency of the distribution chain. More importantly, to reduce the pesticides and the poisons that we actually put into the environment.
Yeah, so that's like one vertical, as you can see, that's already significantly profound to me and can change a lot about how the world works. Yeah, so what he said was smart agriculture. So the way that this type of technology can improve and optimize the supply chain around agriculture, specifically around the pesticides and chemicals that are going into those things, how they're distributed, and take a lot of the human error out of it.
Yeah, we reduce water input and increase crop yields, things like that.
Next slide. All right, so now there's some problems with Internet of Things that I've tracked as an amateur in this space. And for one is that there are single points of failure. There's a lot of Internet of Things that's currently very centralized. This leads to problems like censorship. So like if a private company is doing the work of the connectivity between these things, they can say it's like, well, we're going to use our partner's products, but we're not going to use your partner's products. That doesn't help a whole lot. Next. And, you know, clever way of saying this is like we have lots of really smart devices, but our network is still kind of old school, kind of old paradigm. And that brings us to the most exciting buzzwords of today. The thing that, unless you've been sleeping under a rock, you have been thoroughly frustrated and annoyed by, or buying Lambos with. So who here has not heard of blockchain? And it's okay. Okay, who here considers himself an expert in blockchain space? Really? No experts in blockchain space? Oh, come on. Like who checks CoinMarketCap at least 5 times a day? There we go. Who had a panic attack last night? I actually think it's really great that we're doing this presentation today in the midst of kind of one of the biggest market downturns, the biggest market downturn of the year, in a line of several of them over the past week, because this is about the technology, and you know we're not about just buying Lambos. We're all about the technology. I should have put that slide in there. So let's talk about blockchain. All right, let's talk about networks for a second. This is just kind of a simple overview of like the traditional network is centralized, where there's like a single server, a single node in the center where all the different computers or devices are connected. That upgrades to something like more of a decentralized service. You can think like cloud computing, where there are more nodes out there that the devices can connect to, but they still have various degrees of centralization to them. And then this is kind of just a terminology lesson. There are distributed networks where really any node in the network can behave in the same way that a server or a central node could. And that's kind of what one of the objectives that we're going for with distributed ledger tech, specifically with Internet of Things. You may have heard things like edge computing, fog computing, mist computing. Anybody heard of these things?
Edge, but not the other. What are the other two?
Yeah, so starting with edge computing, it's the idea, basically a fully distributed network, that any device at the edge of the network can operate autonomously. And then fog and mist computing is like, I guess it's kind of a stretch from cloud computing, where we're really, you can start to think of like the internet itself as distributed. And God, I just totally drew a blank. Help me out, Matthew. What's fog and mist computing?
Well, I've been the global ambassador for Open Fog Consortium, actually, working with Microsoft, so a little bit about this. I think your explanation's pretty good, actually. Really, it's about high-profile performance and artificial intelligence and applications at the edge, because certain applications require that kind of performance, like connected vehicle or automotive vehicle, emergency healthcare, transportation, and things like that. So it is, to your point, is about the internet coming right to the edge. And what really pisses off the governments is that data may never get to the cloud, and it may stay along the edge. At which point then we have a very interesting revolution.
Yeah, we can definitely go down that rabbit hole as well. Also, like if you watched the last season of Silicon Valley, you know what they were excited to do with Pied Piper. That was edge. That was like fog computing. Like, let's put the internet through our phones. And then there doesn't have to be servers, so it's kind of like that. Watch Silicon Valley. Go ahead. All right, so just some principles about distributed ledger tech. This allows data sets to be shared amongst all the parties that are involved. You don't have to go to a central repository. Every party in the network can verify the data sets of other participants in the network. Once again, not requiring third-party audit protocols like lawyers or banks and such. And tampered data sets are excluded, so something doesn't validate with the audit trail in the reconciliation process, those aren't included. I won't dive too much into this, but this is kind of the hokey pokey. This is what it's all about. This is the killer app of the blockchain world, is these applications. And if you want to talk more about that, kind of make notes, and when we get to more Q&A or group discussion, we can dive down these rabbit holes. Immutable single source of shared truth. Shared truth among all networks. If it doesn't seem like a big deal, just mark it as a big deal in your mind and then wait for that shared truth to download. All right, limitations of blockchain as it's currently, or at least the early developments of it is that it has scalability issues. The more that it grows, the slower that it gets. There can be data storage issues with the expenses of that. The consensus mechanism, how these ledgers are reconciled, how this shared truth gets reconciled, is decoupled from the data transfer actually happening. So that's mining. So like with Bitcoin, when I send a transaction to Stephen, someone in China or wherever has to crunch that data and mine it in competition for rewards and fees before our transaction gets added to the blockchain. So that's a very separated, not autonomous process. There can be censorship of various transactions with the amount of fees that get charged at any time. If those of you have gotten caught up with the Ethereum network recently with CryptoKitties and things like that, there's some interesting challenges. Keep going. Oh yeah, there it is. Bandwidth issues, yep, fees. There can be data privacy issues. Obviously, a number of crypto commodities are addressing that. Block size limits. Now, this is the big one, is that in reference to the Internet of Things, if we're talking about billions of devices all connected together, the way current blockchains are designed, they just can't handle billions of nano transactions. And when I say nano transactions, these are like very minute bits of data, or even value transactions. And when I talk more about IOTA, obviously that word means a lot of different things. It's the smallest letter in the Greek alphabet, but one of the definitions is that it's a very, very small thing. And so IOTA is meant to solve this problem and allow for micro and nano transactions, so that if I want to send Casey a millionth of a cent for a piece of data that he's throwing off, a blockchain's not going to do that if it's charging me $30 for a transaction fee. Okay, so what kind of solution is this? So the IOTA Foundation, the original founders, they wanted to rethink this from scratch and to come up with a revolutionary new distributed ledger tech that's designed specifically for machine-to-machine transactions. And that's where we get the Tangle. Who's heard of the Tangle before? Okay, so the Tangle is the kind of shorthand for the distributed ledger tech that underlies IOTA.
So is that the replacement or the equivalent of blockchain? Is the Tangle?
Yeah, that is exactly it. And it's you can think of it as perhaps transcending and including a blockchain, where it has the same advantages of a blockchain, where consistently having a fully reconciled history with every transaction, but it's multidimensional. So it's not linear. It can go in different directions. And it's the technical term for the Tangle is a DAG, a directed acyclic graph, which is a really geeky, cool mathematical principle that they were stoked to see if they could make work for this application. Okay, so the DAG bundles all the transactions together into this, go back, just the left arrow. bundles all the transactions together into this directed acyclic graph, this DAG. Completely self-regulating. Consensus is no longer decoupled. Let me talk about this. This is kind of the most interesting differentiating aspect about the Tangle compared to a blockchain, and it's that the proof of work, and that's kind of the consensus mechanism. There's other consensus mechanisms, proof of stake, proof of authority is now getting a lot of airplay, but who's heard of proof of work before? So yeah, proof of work is basically what a miner does in reconciling the ledger. So instead of a transaction needing to go to a bunch of miners somewhere else to reconcile, in using the Tangle in an IOTA transaction, I send Stephen a millionth of a cent, but to do that, I have to reconcile 2 previous transactions that are on the Tangle, which is actually like a negligible amount of computing power. It's pretty easy, but that's kind of like my ticket to ride on the Tangle is, and so, you know, some of the FUDsters are like, well, it's not actually feeless, you still have to do computing. Well, it's like, well, right, yes, that's true. But that's how the work, the proof of work, the consensus mechanism is distributed across the whole network, and therefore making it actually autonomous. So this is what makes it scalable and a low overhead proof of work mechanism. And actually spamming the Tangle network makes it more efficient. So spam away, attack IOTA and make us stronger. It's kind of like the anti-fragile, distributed ledger tech.
How does it make it more efficient?
Because every transaction that happens has to solve 2 previous transactions. So to interface with the network at all, I'm having to do proof of work, and any transactions that are happening on the network make it more efficient. And so this very complicated graph here, brilliant marketing material. It's just making the point that as more transactions happen on a traditional blockchain, it becomes less efficient. More transactions that happen on the Tangle make it more efficient. Go ahead. All right, so the IOTA Tangle is run by a nonprofit foundation registered in Berlin with the purpose of developing and standardizing these new technologies. These numbers have probably already changed, but there's at least 22 developers, 12 researchers, all sorts of advisors, and they're announcing new hires every day. I recommend that you follow the IOTA blog and the Twitter feeds, because it's really cool the talent that the IOTA Foundation is attracting. Like some of the most interesting, like mathematicians, physics specialists are coming in to work on this incredibly complicated challenge of how do you reconcile networks that are meant to basically be ready, for the next decades of billions of transactions happening, and it's exciting stuff. They've got offices all over the world. Currently, Berlin, Oslo, Chicago. They just announced their Tel Aviv office today. And then there's people like in the Evangelist Network like myself, and then just regional partners all over the world, and growing all the time. These are the most well-known founders of IOTA, infamous, you might say. David Sinstaba, Sergey Ivancheglo is known, has come from beyond on Twitter. He's a fun guy to watch him get in fights with other crypto space people. Dominic Shiner is kind of the shiny front end and doing presentations like this. He makes them look really good. And Sergey Popov is actually the mathematician genius who originally wrote the white paper and was kind of the promoter of using this DAG technology to try to solve this problem. Now, all these guys were old blockchain guys, and they were involved in the blockchain 2.0 movement when like Next came along, and they were starting to check out things like smart contracts, like e-voting, like things like that, while Ethereum was getting into the game as well. And they really wanted to solve this problem for Internet of Things. And it was just kind of understood that blockchain just couldn't do it, hence going towards the DAGs. So I want to read this ethos because I've been consistently impressed with the IOTA Foundation, and how they come across things and their ideologies in general. So IOTA's vision is to create, enable, and foster permissionless innovation. The IOTA Foundation, in its role to serve the public's interest, will be solely dedicated towards the development, research, education, and collaboration necessary to elevate the ecosystem to the next level. We want to see IOTA evolve into a global movement that empowers the future generation of visionaries, creators, and entrepreneurs to work together towards a better future. The IOTA Foundation will act as a regulated and independent entity taking a neutral position when it comes to politics, ideology, and alternative technologies. And so, like, I recommend that if you're a technical person, read the IOTA white paper, but also read the various blog posts on the IOTA Foundation page, because you can start to get a sense of what these folks care about and what they're trying to do with this technology, because it doesn't take a whole lot of sophistication, psychological sophistication, when you start dreaming into the Internet of Things and the Skynet monsters that are going to try to take over our brains. There's all sorts of political challenges that we're going to face with this. And that means the decisions that are being made today with the foundations of this, how the governance goes, how the decision making happens, how the technology is written, how secure it is, are somewhat foundational. Especially you talk about artificial intelligence X-risk researchers who are saying that the end of mankind is 10 years away. This might be the technology that helps move in that direction. So we want to trust the people who are under the hood in doing this, and these guys have been there since the beginning. Now, the economics of IOTA is very interesting as well. This isn't a group that's like, okay, we're going to do an ICO and we're going to, carve out 60% of the tokens for the founding team and then do an ICO and pump it and go that way. They didn't carve out any of the tokens for the founders. The founders had the opportunity to buy tokens during the ICO if they wanted to get in on that. They did carve out 5% for the foundation, which is a nonprofit registered in Berlin, and for the funding of the foundation. But they programmed smart contracts in to hit that, so that money wasn't even released. Those tokens weren't even released until the foundation paperwork was complete. I can't actually say that was done with a smart contract, so I have to correct myself when I take some leaps there. But they're doing all sorts of interesting things like this, like the IOTA Ecosystem Fund. They authorized $10 million in funds available to anyone who wants to apply to contribute to this ecosystem. You can go onto the IOTA site right now and submit a simple form, and it really can be anywhere. It can be with software development, but it can be with climate action, movements or marketing materials or something like that. And these funds are earmarked for the development of the ecosystem. They want to grow this out. And there's a whole number of contests that they're doing like this. Who here has heard of like the Cambrian explosion? Someone say it. What was the Cambrian explosion? Yeah.
It was a time of evolutionary fecundity where the amounts of species rose at astronomical rates. The amount of species just kept on evolving at faster and faster rates.
Yeah, the diversity of the species, and it was a relatively short and kind of a evolutionary biological time frame. It was 10 million years, where hundreds of millions of years of evolution was happening with a limited amount of diversity in the biology. And in this very short period of time, there was a massive diversification and coevolution, where species just started coming all over the place. And if you look at the evolutionary timescale, it was right before kind of creatures crawled up onto land and then eventually got to humans. And so there's a potential that I think we're headed towards, and this is what some of the IOTA founding team talk about a lot. This is where I got this slide actually from David Sinstapa's presentation. But that this is what we want to try to enable, where with a technology like this that's fully autonomous, that allows people to innovate at their own pace without needing to check in with any centralized authorities or wait on someone else to do it, we can actually have like the evolution and the integration of tensions that are happening around the world being solved for at a faster rate. And I think that's in general the promise of all this technological innovation that's happening. All right, so I'm going to get into some of the use cases. Economy of things. Go one more slide. Who's heard of the economy of things? What's that? So it's kind of like the sharing of things. And this is where a lot of people who are in this space believe that this technology is going to help redefine what ownership is. And that's already happened if you look at it, things like Uber or Airbnb specifically, of where I can take my house and I'm going out of town for a week and I can actually rent that space out for a short amount of time, leveraging the technology that exists. Well, imagine if you can apply that same kind of technology to anything in your life, specialized equipment, all of those things where, by the second you can rent out all sorts of commodities. That's what this technology can allow. So like anything with a chip in it can be leased, and then the devices can actually trade resources amongst themselves. So with Internet of Things and machine-to-machine microtransactions, then the machines can just take care of that on their own, and we don't have to manually to work on that. That promises a lot for human beings. If you want to think of a specific use case with like a solar grid, you can imagine a solar grid that doesn't need to kind of send its energy onto the grid, like back to Excel, and then buy that from Excel. You could have a solar grid in a community where the usage of that energy it's just managed by the node on the grid, and it's used by the transactions are based by usage. And go one more slide. That's actually already happening. There's a town in Kazakhstan, I believe. I'll have to check on that, but already has like a clutch of solar grids that are sending electricity to the town there, and they're either already using or are trying to implement IOTA to help make that happen. So it doesn't take a whole lot of technological sophistication to have a solar grid, just measuring the usage for each of the people that are plugged into it and handling those transactions automatically.
Can I ask you a quick- Do you know whether they are using any form of social ethics? So, for example, during the winter, the elderly would have a lower rate than maybe the middle class or those that are earning, who would actually pay more for actually sustain the elderly. Do you know whether any kind of social inclusion around that at all in the framework?
Yeah, that's a great question. The question was about to what degree are we working with social inclusion and ethics? I think the IOTA Foundation is focused on enabling the technology so that those problems can be solved as easily as possible without any people getting in the way about it. So that basically, if a town in Africa has a solution to that, they can implement that autonomously, and then perhaps upload that into a network for other people to take advantage of that. But they don't have to wait on going to a bank, getting credit to fund a business, to therefore then attract the right kind of talent. They can handle it on their own.
What's the difference between MIOTA and IOTA?
Yeah, so the way the IOTA is scaled out, so basically MIOTA is 1 million IOTAs. And so there can all the way down to the nano IOTAs and all the way up to the tera and peta and so forth IOTAs. Basically, so you can scale the amount of value being transacted to whatever degree you need. There's a lot of mobility use cases happening right now. I think this is one of the easier ways that the foundation has been able to attract industry partners, particularly Volkswagen, I believe, is working on doing having the car have its own, the electric vehicle have its own wallet, and when it charges, it pays for that charge automatically with the charging unit. So there's think about like a parking garage. Your car just pays for the down to the second that you use that space automatically. Toll stations. There could be opportunity for traffic optimization, where you can actually pay for optimized lane usage and get all sorts of elitist implications there. Car charging, car sharing economy, obviously platooning, all the things that we wished were happening with traffic. The Internet of Things could allow for that, and a distributed ledger tech allows not for just one Internet of Things company to solve for it, but any company that wants to participate and solve for these problems and say, it's listen, we're buying this data from the traffic sensors, we're seeing how many cars are going through, and then we can start optimizing the traffic lights based on that.
So to give an example of economy here, you're saying the car has its own wallet, but where does it get the money in its wallet? Do I have to fill it as the owner, or is there some way the car can actually earn money for its wallet?
I think those are great questions, but step one, yes, you fund your car's wallet. or your company funds its car's wallet, etc. But yes, if you're renting your car out to me when I need to go get my groceries, then I'm loading up its wallet for that.
Also, like, let's say we have autonomous cars. I buy an autonomous car, I load the wallet, and it just starts going out, picking people up, it gets paid, then it needs to get charged, so it goes to a charging station. Well, hey, I live in a commuted area downtown, I put a charging station outside, so now I got a charging station working for me, I got a car working for me, and they're off just making money, being entrepreneurs on themselves, and then I'm just sitting back going, this is great, you know? And then my refrigerator is now going to use that, and someone else has a car, and they put the grocery store and groceries in the car pulls up, lets me know, the refrigerator just made money, their car made money, and I just get to do email and look at Facebook all day.
Yeah. My milk's still in your refrigerator. I need to get that back. Right? Did y'all track that? Like that, he included a lot of important things in that. This was a cool thing that IOTA participated in. There was a Hack for Climate hackathon in Switzerland this year that over 20,000 delegates were a part of, and IOTA was the platform sponsor for this event. And these are the kinds of opportunities that they're partnering with all the time. And so it's not about just like get rich quick and ramp up with technology, but it's we're looking at impact oriented projects here. So I think really the big place that obviously the IOTA Foundation is focused on is with the Internet of Things, and about how data is really the commodity of the future. And that if you think of an autonomous or like a smart car out there, a Tesla riding down the road that has so many sensors on it, just gathering data by the millisecond, that data can become very valuable, especially if I'm a city planner and trying to implement smart city type technology. Weather data, there's lots of things that are going to become very useful. Well, how do I get access to that data? Well, this is where IOTA just launched this year, and this is where they got their big increase in valuation was the data marketplace, and creating a space where various participants can contribute data with their technology, but also have a place to buy it. And now it's currently private right now, and go to the next slide. I think it has some of the participants in that. Yeah, so these are some of the participants that are included in that data marketplace. Obviously, these aren't small potatoes. There's some big industry partners working on this, and that's really, I think, the most exciting thing that's starting to garner IOTA Foundation some attention is what's possible when all of this data starts to be marketed and we can see the value for it, and it's easy to participate in that. And it won't be long before any of us, you want to pop a weather sensor on your house, you want to create sensors for all sorts of different kinds of things. You can do that and then start selling your data through a marketplace like this. There's a guy out of Toronto who I've been following who's just cranking out sensors for IOTA left and right. And I talked to him. I found this device that plugs into your home's circuit breaker box and tracks your electrical usage, and it has like a light that shows you when you're using above more electricity than normal or below, kind of like it's from the book Nudge. They kind of found that, and I was talking to this guy out of Toronto, and he said it'd be really easy to plug that data into the Tangle, and so that like regionally here in Boulder we could gamify our electrical usage. You could have a simple website that just shows it's like, well, my business only uses this much electricity based on our background norms, and I think that's some of the fun stuff that we can do now. We can do today in Boulder and contribute to a game that's being played globally.
Can we then shame excessive users?
The shaming just happens naturally. You don't even have to do it. So just some updates on what's ahead for you speculators. The new wallet, the Trinity wallet, is in security audits right now. It should come out any day now. Obviously, the IOTA Foundation wasn't prioritizing peer-to-peer usage, so they haven't been focusing on creating a sexy user-friendly wallet when they're focusing on building a platform that's quantum secure, capable of doing machine-to-machine transactions. But the new wallet that is sexy and user-friendly is coming soon. A majority of the major cryptocurrency exchanges are loaded up. They have the technology ready. They're just, for whatever reason, taking their time to announce that. But you can most likely expect IOTA to be trading on majority of the major exchanges any day now. The data marketplace I was just speaking to is going to open up to the public before long, meaning that once again you can start selling your data, sell all your precious data. Smart contracts are going to be implemented on the Tangle before long, so there's already been talk and planning for doing like ICO, like crowdfunding launches using the Tangle, like platforms like Ethereum are doing. For those that know some of the challenges with IOTA a little more, there's a coordinator node which acts as kind of like a shepherd for the tip selection of if I'm going to do a transaction and get into the Tangle and solve some transactions. There's very complicated algorithms for which transactions I'm going to solve that don't leave my transaction orphaned. And there's currently a node called the coordinator that's helping kind of like as a shepherd keep things closer into where the action is. That coordinator is going to be open source soon, and then eventually it's going to be removed once the Monte Carlo random walk algorithm is successfully going, which that's the sexy mathematical work that's happening. And then Q, the mysterious Q, that's kind of like in the culture a fun Easter egg of we're wondering what that's actually going to be, but most likely it's going to have to do with the quantum computing that's happening in the GEN technology that is basically a new chipset that's going to take advantage of the ternary cryptography, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We can talk more about that if we want to geek out. Here's a screenshot of the new wallet. It's kind of hard to see with this light, but you can see the sexiness. Feel the sexiness. Go ahead. So what can we do here in Boulder? It's my desire to have regular meetup gatherings going on for those of us who are enthusiastic about IOTA and want to get our hands dirty with some projects, maybe play around with some sensors, use some masked authenticated messaging, some flash channels, all this technology that is ready to go and want to play with that. I'm interested in that. I'm thinking of bringing together a group. There's already a well-populated meetup group, but I want to just like get some people to commit to like holding this space, once a month, and crowdsourcing some projects and maybe doing some more formal presentations like this where we can attract new partners and let people know as it evolves. So anyone here interested in being involved with ongoing like IOTA type stuff? So once we finish up here, let's get together and see if we can't like commit to some future dates. Basic resource links, actually this Priz IOTA I think is probably one of the best collections of resources and the various tools that can help you get started. If you want to buy IOTA, if you want to know how to generate a seed without losing your mind or losing it and then losing your mind, all of that stuff, there's so much resources. Obviously you can contact me and I can push you in the right direction. So thanks again to the Impact Hub for offering us the space. Please give me some donations so I can give some money to the hub to help keep the heater going here. And let's open it up for just a brief Q&A period. And these questions don't have to be answered by me. They can be answered by the room. But what do you got?
Are there any blockchains that are working in similar fashion that don't allow mining but also strengthen with the number of transactions happening?
There are definitely lots of other platforms that are not mined, that are either pre-mined or don't require mining. There are other DAGs, directed acyclic graphs, like the Tangle. There are other platforms that are aiming to help enable the Internet of Things. So there's platforms in all different directions for that. As far as ones that get stronger as more transactions happen on it, I'm not exactly sure. I'd have to, if anyone knows that, feel free to answer.
I don't know, but are any of the competitors or other ones have theories that are quantum resistant? I don't know if any of them have that same methodology as IOTA to
Yep.
be quantum resistant.
Not that I've heard of, and so.
What is quantum resistant? If you use terminology, and a lot of people here probably don't know much, it'd be helpful to explain.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's one of the reasons he spoke it is to, so once again, IOTA Foundation is very forward-looking, and even though quantum computers are kind of here, they exist, mostly in theory, they're coming. And so once quantum computers are here, a lot of the cryptography that exists with the current blockchains aren't going to hold up to be very secure. So the IOTA Foundation is like, well, if we're going to create something that's really going to last and be sustainable, it needs to be quantum secure. Its cryptography needs to be able to withstand that kind of computing. So they designed. So one of the attacks on IOTA is that they rolled their own cryptography, which is supposedly a no-no in the cryptography world. But these guys know the territory they're in. And other people have rolled their own cryptography, but using a cryptographic base that isn't just kind of like already a standardized one, like creating a new one from the base. That's about as complicated as I can get with it. But the reason they did that was so that it would be quantum secure, and so and they did it off of a ternary base instead of a binary base. So instead of just zeros and ones like normal, like most of technology is today, they wanted to go to a ternary set of -1 zeros and ones, and the whole new. This is another attack on IOTA, is that it's like, well, this is going to require so much technology to upgrade their chipsets to like deal with this ternary computing. And one of the responses is like, well, yeah, what major technological innovations haven't required our chipsets to be upgraded? So that's an exciting thing I think we can look for is some new hardware and new, like, more sophisticated chips that are going to be needed for this quantum age we're moving into. Does that help? Was that? Yeah, well, partners. So the question was, will the ternary processors be built by IOTA? I mean, the IOTA Foundation is specifically built to create the standardizations for the IOTA protocol, the Tangle, but there are partners, I think, look towards Jinn Labs, Jinn, that are positioning themselves to do that, to create that hardware.
Which is, I believe, owned by David Sonsimon, isn't it, or started by David?
He's definitely involved in Sergey Ivancheglo is the principal of that.
Bosch also come out recently and talked about making ternary processors who have not only partnered with IOTA, but I believe they did at the Chicago Meetup, said from January to March they are like doing use case like beta testing with it, and just to kind of see where it goes, and then also are now looking to do ternary processors. Seems like a nice little mesh together.
Yeah, that I hadn't gotten that exact update, but that sounds right. And yes, and Bosch, like one of the big spikes in valuation was when Robert Bosch Venture Partners took a serious position in IOTA at the end of the year, and that's a no messing around venture fund that is like seriously going in long haul. So it makes sense that they'd be going down this road.
And I thought Bosch was drills at
Right.
first, and then when I started researching them, I realized they have like more patents than any other company in the world for autonomous vehicles. So they are one of the leaders in the IO industry, I believe.
Yeah.
I don't know anything for certain. But
So it's very fun for the enthusiast to be like, ooh, Bosch is now doing partnerships with Tesla.
Yeah.
IOTA and Tesla, come on, let's go.
I know you said I could look on Quiz IOTA for how to buy some of this, and just from scanning it, it looks like I would jump on Bitfinex and trade for it with my existing cryptocurrency wallet.
Yeah, if Bitfinex still accepted U.S. customers, which they do not, because dealing with the United States is a tough thing. But Binance is the most, it's the highest volume exchange anyway. But Binance is a great exchange to buy IOTA on, and then you would transfer your fiat dollars into Bitcoin or Ethereum using something like Coinbase, and then transfer that over to Binance and buy your IOTA there, and then wait till the wallet comes out, unless you really want to get in the weeds with seeds and such. If anybody wants me to slow down on any of that, just bookmark it, let me know.
And just to make a point, if anyone is new to blockchain, or IOTA especially,
Yeah.
wants to not hold it on the exchange because exchanges have been hacked, to know that IOTA was created for a machine-to-machine economy. So they created a wallet that was very specific on how you use it. Now for a machine, that's it. You tell it how to use it, and it'll never waver from that. As a human, you can mess it up. And by messing it up, you can essentially reveal your key or your seed, and someone can hack your wallet. So like Robert said, leave it on the exchange until the wallet. If you really want to take it off, just do a lot of reading
Yeah.
and make sure you're very comfortable with it, and never make your seed online. Your seed is essentially a password, and they have numerous online, because it's an 81 character password. Hey, make it online, and you go, okay, I'll make it online. It just sent a copy to a hacker, and then they get hacked. So it's very, so you have to do your research.
Yep.
This is essentially beta technology, but it was just interesting, and the developers have said, that was kind of our mistake. We were focused on the machine economy, but didn't realize how much growth would come to it.
Yeah.
And now they're all about the user-friendly wallet. And
Yeah.
have even hired the UCL team, I believe,
Yes.
who were first volunteering to do it. So.
Yeah, it's definitely moving in that direction for those reasons. But it is interesting, when they make something, they're like, oh, I lost my seed. How do I get it? It's like, well, it's quantum secure. There's no absolute way. We worked as hard as we could so that you cannot get it back. and all the reasons why there isn't just like basic two-factor authentication and everything like that. It's because they're thinking of different use cases. They're really trying to go for like high scalability of machine-to-machine transactions. But yeah, thanks.
Curious about how like the Tango works in comparison to the blockchain. So Tango, from my understanding, is built for machine-to-machine operations. So is there like, if you're to compare it to something like Ethereum or like Bitcoin, is there like one central ledger? There's like all these different parts of the Tango? Like how, if there is, like how like transparent is that, or is it private by nature? Or like how would someone as like an end user like interact with it, and like how does that work?
Yeah, so basically, like in broad strokes, comparing blockchain to the Tangle, and so it is totally public. There are Tangle explorers to the same ways that there are like Bitcoin blockchain explorers. So if you have the hash of a transaction, you can plug it into the Tangle Explorer and see it. There's actually cool Tangle visualizers, so you can like plug your transaction in there and then like watch the different node selection in 3D space and fun things like that. But in broad strokes, it's very much the same, but with the Tangle, it's like, I make a transaction. That transaction, I solve a couple transactions, and then it kind of puts it into the waiting pool until it's confirmed by a future transaction.
You got it. So it works in like a pretty similar way.
Yep.
So how is IOTA, or I guess Tangle, solving the issue with growth of blockchain and or growth of a ledger? Because currently with Ethereum, right, it's multi-gigabytes and it's just few people using it. But with IoT, you're gonna have like I said, billions of devices doing transactions. So how are you gonna prevent the ledger from exploding and everybody having to have a copy of it?
Well, I think that's the idea, is to get it to explode, really big. But it's the idea, the way the math of the DAG works, of the directed acyclic graph, is that once again, the more people that are participating in it, the faster it goes. So that the more the transactions are instant, but the storage of it. Well, I think I heard David Sinstaba say it's kind of like the limitations are like speed of light at a certain point, and like we can't get to we can't wrestle with those limitations. But besides that, it isn't too much of a concern. I'm probably not answering your question very well, but
they do snapshots. So
yes.
What they will do is once the tangle grows to a certain extent, it becomes too large, they can actually take a snapshot and they cut off all the previous transactions from there and move everything into the new addresses, and it basically starts off very small.
Yeah.
I think they want to try to automate the snapshots.
Yeah.
Which is a big thing, as well as their corporate partners like Bosch, who are doing maybe a large amount of those IO transactions. They essentially will maybe create they'll be like nodes, and they'll always keep a copy as well.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of really interesting use cases. Like one of them, the common one is like, let's say you have a shipping liner with like a bunch of sensors in your shipping containers all trying to communicate with each other, but that goes off the grid when it goes into the Atlantic Ocean. But it still has a version of the Tangle going and tracking all those transactions, and when it reconnects with the grid, it reconciles with the rest of the Tangle, so that any of this really can operate autonomously, but then plug back in seamlessly. So.
It's not the concept of I don't know much about it, but in terms of having a transaction depends on other transactions. Pretty much it's like a convolution of the transaction prior to others. So pretty much the past doesn't matter much because it's kind of a running cache.
Yes.
of the latest. And the
Yes.
bigger it is, the most hard to mess with that.
Yeah.
Because you're only dealing with 4 or 5 transactions, I don't know, or maybe 10.
Yeah.
But not the whole ledger, or the Bitcoin, or the regular ledger that it has. So maybe those snapshots is just kind of a log of history, but the transaction itself is a kind of a running key.
Yes.
Multifaceted key.
Yeah. Well said.
What does it mean to solve a transaction? What does that mean?
In its most simplest terms, it's like reconciling the ledger. It's like, balancing my checkbook. So it's just like verifying that the transaction actually happened with the data that's being submitted. Now that's kind of simplistic terms. On the actual kind of like mathematical level, it's taking the cryptographic keys and reconciling them. You're reaching the limits of actually my own knowledge. Can you say that in a more specific way? Yeah. Yeah, maybe I can get back to you on that one. What's actually happening in the verification of the transaction?
I think too that, someone was explaining the other day, if I do a transaction and I have a whole auditorium of bookkeepers, and then they all go to make sure that it all lines up. And if there's any errors, if I made an error, and they go, oh, you made an error, that's incorrect. And then when the consensus of the group says, okay, you made a transaction and this is the result, and then they say, okay, we're gonna commit that, then that's committed. And essentially in blockchain, you have all your miners doing that. They're all checking and checking and checking and checking and checking, and they're throwing out all the bad stuff. No, that's incorrect. You double spend, right?
Yep.
I spend here, I spend there, but you're trying to cheat, forget it. 'Cause
Yep.
you've got thousands of basically power, let's say, doing that. Well, with blockchain, all that power is using all that electricity. With IOTA, it's spread out on a micro level to all the users, so that power is distributed. So every time you send something, you click, you do a little power to check, and we're just all
So
checking.
once a transaction is verified, does it ever get verified again? I mean, is it just a random verification where?
Well, I think that's part of that algorithm, the tip selection. So it's some of them can be, I would assume.
There's
get
multiple
checked
confirmations,
again,
yeah.
But again, the algorithm, and that's the new algorithm, is trying to get the most efficient. So every single transaction, because blockchain is linear, it's definitely easier to check all that, where the DAG is much more
Yep.
dimensional.
And it's
so
like my microwave is balancing my checkbook. And
How big does the network has to be to avoid being hackable? Because I check 2 transactions, but if I have a network big enough that is bigger, I can overcome the network and basically break the whole thing.
right.
Just overcome one transaction and actually overcome another thing.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
So you can only overcome one transaction. You can't hack the whole network. So it's infeasible if you have that much computing power.
If I am a company and I want to break the whole thing,
Yeah.
I can code my chips and bring 20 million chips into the network, and
Yep.
I can overcome whatever I want if I have enough power. The thing is,
Yep.
is it going to be supervised until you have that critical point where no
Yes.
matter how big I can bring, how much power I can bring to the network, I cannot.
And that's when the coordinator is going to be turned off. That's the purpose of the coordinator right now, is to that. And so you may have heard of the what is it, the 51% problem with Bitcoin blockchains, where similar thing. If I get enough computers mining on the blockchain, on the Bitcoin network, then I can totally just drive the consensus mechanism of that and be a bad agent that way. With the Tangle, it's something like 33%. But there's some really good articles and good interviews with some of the founders explaining the answers to this. That for one thing, anyone who's investing that much computing power into that is going to be making the Tangle stronger until they get to a point where they can take it over. But it's a bit of a ridiculous concept, but worth considering. And that's once the network is at a certain size, it'll be easy to turn the coordinator off. Does that help?
Yeah.
Yeah, close enough.
So you mentioned storing data sets in the network. So is there a plan for there to be types of applications built on top? Is it kind of structured in that way? And how do you handle advanced time-based querying when you're just distributing the actual chain itself?
Totally, that's a great question. Actually, timestamps was one of the big challenges that the Tangle was wrestling with. They worked out a solution this year on it. I don't know how they did it, but But yes, one of the really cool things about the Tangle is you actually, because there's no fees, you don't have to send like currency with it. Like you can send a zero value transaction that just includes data on it, and then the masked authenticated messaging protocols and some of the others enable very cool ways to do that. So long story short, I don't know the exact answer to your question, but it's in conversation.
Peak is doing that, I believe.
Yeah.
Peak is a company, and basically they're going to use IOTA as a foundation, then layer above it, and allow for tokens to be put on it, these smart contracts to be put on it, and of course it's zero transactions, so you don't need to pay gas, ether gas, neogas, any of that. It just all goes on. Is that kind of what you're?
So the question I have is it essentially only verifying distributed data, or is it something that can be queried like a database?
Good question. I assume it can. I mean, it currently can be queried like a database with an Explorer, but not at that level.
Only probably optimized for the ID hashes, not actually doing advanced querying. Like, show me all the people within 5 miles of me.
Right. Right. So we'll see. I would love to do more research on that question and see what the answers to it, because there very well could already be protocols like within the Flash channels for solving for those problems.
I wonder if that falls in the data marketplace too, that basically people or corporations or governments can query the data itself.
Right.
I wouldn't assume that there's.
So let's just do a few more, and then I want to break us out. And so let me go here since you've already had one.
Yeah, so you already hit on a few of these points, but there was an article that came out a little while ago from I believe it was the MIT Media Lab.
Yes.
That got a lot of hype. Should the user community be concerned about some of that stuff that's been released, rolling your own crypto, trinary, and a few of the other things, like the rapid growth in the community? Not to say that all these problems are isolated to just IOTA, but curious to your perspective.
I mean, short answer always, it's certainly if you're an investor, if you're looking to take a position in the growth of one of these platforms, like you are investing in an early stage startup, do your due diligence. And yeah, if you see something that's labeled as MIT saying that it's got all these problems with it, you're going to take that into consideration. But hopefully you'll do another step of research and see that actually that the association between that digital currency lab and MIT is kind of flimsy, and all those people are invested in other cryptocurrencies, and that it might be some market manipulation when they sent that out. And there's several good articles refuting every point in that. Sure. But it takes some digging to get to those levels.
IOTA as a token, it exists right now, right?
Yes.
So I can trade it and go to a platform and buy it.
Yes.
The part of microtransaction between devices is not there yet, right?
Oh yeah, it is.
Oh, it is?
For sure.
So they have this ternary whatever processes already built into the device. They're using.
Well, the ternary has to then go to work with a binary processor currently, which is less optimal, but still incredibly fast. So yeah, we could be doing masked authenticated messaging, sending data back and forth. We can set up smart grids right now using Tangle the way it is. And they're just optimizing the stability of it to go ahead. Let's go here then here.
What are practical projects that programmers or electrical engineers could build to help create more markets, or more devices, or
Mm-hmm.
basically help push IOTA forward with our programming and electrical engineers?
This is questions that I want to have more answers for. I want Boulder, Denver to have some good things to say about that. And I think if we build a strong enough community here, I'd love us to host a hackathon and actually come in with some really interesting problems, bring a bunch of developers, a bunch of innovators into the same room, and use this technology to push it ahead. Because really, it's up for anyone to find the right problems and then innovate the solutions. The technology is just creating a really nice blank space, open canvas for that to happen. So let's look for answers to that question.
So what does IOTA as a token actually represent? You mentioned that there was no ICO. So does it represent?
Oh, there was.
There was?
Yes.
So it does represent kind of stake in the company, the enterprise.
It depends on how you define stake.
It's not like Ethereum where you use it for gas, for transactions. So what is IOTA, the token?
It all depends on the use case. So it's like if you want to get some of the electricity from my solar grid, you could send me the IOTA based on the market rate of electricity that we determine. So it is transfer of like currency value that way, but it can also be used as a vehicle for data transfer. But it's this is what's currently still being defined right now, when we're still kind of like developing the psychological sophistication to even understand how to use it. But as all this data starts pouring out, this is IOTA is going to be the currency, or it's vying to be the currency to help that.
So it's IOTA working on of connecting to AI and kind of new protocols for contracts definition, something. Is there any specific sources for that?
For like what's happening in that space?
Well, yeah, like defining new protocols and even new models for defining contracts.
Yeah, the smart contract like technology on top of the Tangle is in development and coming. That's about all I know about it. I mean, besides that, there's all these opportunities of leveraging
those questions are answered.
Yeah.
How to use it and who decides
That's
to
right.
do the transaction and when and
Yeah.
under which conditions, which parameters. And
I mean, like in general, for the whole kind of crypto protocol space, we're going to see this. It's kind of like to the degree that like back in 2013, there was all sorts of altcoins came out after Bitcoin with some just like, ideas of use cases. A lot of those vanished because they didn't become relevant. And then like blockchain 2.0 type platforms like Ethereum came online and decentralized apps started developing on top of that. And we're like, oh, this is how we can use this. We're going to keep seeing more and more waves of this happen because now there's this whole new generation with like EOS and like Icon, all these other platforms that are competing with Ethereum, and then of course IOTA. What kind of decentralized apps are going to sit on top of this? It's kind of up to our visioning to figure out.
Question: someone knows if someone is doing the kind of a web IOTA type of HTTP, at that level of protocol to get
There are a number of tools out there, like already, like using those layers. That Priz IOTA link has some good references there.
Has there been math done for like when you get up to like millions of transactions per second and how that impacts the network, especially when you're dealing with that much data transfer between nodes?
So the foundation is doing lots of like supercomputer simulations to see what happens to the network once we get up to thousands of transactions a second. I don't know if they've done simulations on millions of transactions per second yet. So to be determined, I guess, but they've pushed it pretty far already, and obviously that's an active question in the space, for what it can do. And frankly, there isn't other tech that can handle that. Yeah, well, there's some that say they can, so we'll see.
Well, there's distributed tech that can handle that.
Like
Facebook right now is at millions of transactions per second. They're
right.
Like 1 to 10 million transactions per second.
Yep.
And that's not even a third of the population. If you're talking about machines, you're talking about 10-to-1 ratio beyond that.
Yeah. Great point. Yeah, like what's it going to take for like a Facebook level adoption to sit on a technology like the Tangle, and can it handle it?
And I think part of that comes in with the ternary chipset, the ternary code. Is now the ternary chipset offers energy efficiency as well as cheaper productivity. But when I believe, and I could be completely wrong, but when you get the ternary chipset, all of a sudden you can put a node on a phone. So now your node's on the phone in the car. So as many IO devices are using it are also running a node, so that should add to that scalability, right? Because then they're confirming two transactions. You're getting faster. You get faster and faster and faster and faster. The more nodes you have. Currently, we're at such a small level of that graph, right? But and we need a computer for the node. But if we could take that node and put it on a watch, put it on a smartphone, put it on a phone, put it in a bus, put it in a little sensor, all of a sudden it's just two transactions, and now theoretically, maybe you go to millions, hundreds of millions, whatever. There's really no ceiling at that aspect. So.
It's a It's a really important question, especially when we see CryptoKitties take down the entire Ethereum network. You know, the supercomputer of the world taken down by card
Rob,
trading.
I've just got an endorsement from one of the biggest Bitcoin owners in the world. My buddy advises him, and he says, IOTA team are very, very smart. Keep an eye on it.
You and I have never met, sir. Bye bye. All right, so I'm inclined to kind of wrap up the formal presentation right now and let this thing kind of distribute with its technology and our distributed social technology here. And so I want to also, those of you that were interested in having an ongoing IOTA meetup gatherings like once a month and taking some responsibility for organizing that, meet me in this corner. We'll do just a quick like 5-10 minute huddle up. And other than that, I just want to say thank you for coming out tonight. Thank you to the Impact Hub, and let's keep on keeping on with our bad selves.